Hello everyone. I've been prompted to make this video through my many discussions with the good public at the many Hold the Line protests currently going on around the country. These people, being very good-natured and kind, tend to believe that the government is a kind and benevolent force for good, well in actuality it is thoroughly not, and in this video I intend to prove it. Better time to do it with the recent events in Davos and of course current political events that are going on in Ireland. So in this video I intend to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that our leaders, be they political, cultural, religious, scientific, etc., do not have our best interests at heart and are in fact working against our interests and simply just do not care about us at all. To them we are nothing, we are vermin under their feet. I believe the best way to do this is first of all to put our leaders in some sort of historical context. To do this, we'll pick one modern day leader and one from approximately 30 odd years ago, just to show how much things have changed in the short time period since then. The two leaders I've picked are as follows: Justin Trudeau, the current Canadian Prime Minister, and Princess Diana, the Princess of Wales, from the early 80s to the late 90s. Now, at first this may seem like quite a stupid comparison. I can hear many of you rage typing into your keyboards right now. Diana was not an absolute monarch. She just couldn't do a mad King George and declare war on the 13 colonies as he did back in 1776. But on closer inspection, these two historical characters, though they seem completely polar opposites, have many things in common, which sounds like an awful insult for old Di to be compared to that creep Trudeau, but take that as it is. For starters, both characters came from the ruling class, the establishment, whatever you want to call it. Princess Diana's father, Earl Spencer, was a minor form of nobility, while Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, was the Prime Minister of Canada for 2 terms. He was also the head of the Canadian Liberal Party, which, for those of you unfamiliar with Canadian politics, would sort of like be like the American Democrats mixed in with a little bit of Fine Gael from Ireland and kind of Labour from the UK. In addition to this, both leaders became symbols of their respective countries at extremely young ages. And indeed, both leaders could be seen as symbols for the sort of future that we want to have in the next 10 to 20 years. More on this later. But these leaders, they differ in one very important and very meaningful respect: how they treated people and how they looked at themselves in relation to other people. To illustrate this point, I'm going to play 2 clips, one from the past and one from the present. And these really show the contrast between the attitudes our leaders have towards us.
Due to fear and prejudice, many still do not want to listen. After all, AIDS is a killer. The uncharitable have found the AIDS issue fertile ground to air their prejudices. If their views were voiced to help fight the disease, that would be fine. However, too often their attitudes reveal only their own narrowness of mind and a sad lack of common humanity.
You deserve a government that's going to continue to say, get vaccinated. And you know what? If you don't want to get vaccinated, that's your choice. But don't think you can get on a plane or a train besides vaccinated people and put them at risk.
Now, I really like these 2 clips as they show the absolute difference between how our leaders perceive us as people. It really goes to show you, I think, how our current leadership class just does not care, or does not even want to care or understand about what the ordinary common people want. All they want to do is just, at the very best, serve their own ego. At the very worst, line their pockets and indulge in all sorts of vile, despicable corruption. In the first clip, Princess Diana is very well-spoken and eloquent. She speaks to the public as equals, as people who deserve respect, kindness, compassion. She appeals to very positive emotions through her language. And even though she can clearly see in the last bit she gets quite angry, she doesn't start to scream at the audience or belittle them. She appeals to their intellect, to their compassion, to their reason. In contrast, Justin Trudeau is the polar opposite. He's aggressive, he's petulant, and quite frankly, his performance is more becoming of that of an overindulged, spoilt child who is told that they cannot indulge their passion of sweets or chocolate or ice cream, or cannot buy the next gizmo in the store. He speaks as though he is some sort of miniature god emperor, and it absolutely sickens me to watch him. The condescending, narcissistic attitude of the man. In addition to this, he appeals to the negative side of human emotion, anger, fear and hatred, and he attempts to emotionally blackmail those who don't disagree with him. It's really quite childish, immature, and quite frankly, no one should have to put up with that from their leaders. But anyway, to get back to my point as to the sort of society these two leaders represent, Diana represents the better society, in my opinion. A compassionate, caring society, which expresses tolerance to those who disagree. It doesn't try to crush dissenting voices into the dirt. And a sort of society where everyone sees each other as valuable, with unique interests, attributes and views, even if those views may not perfectly align with the current consensus of the general population. And this, quite frankly, is a society which I would really, really like to live in, and I hope our society becomes in the future. For my sake and for my future children's sake. Contrast, Justin Trudeau represents a superficially tolerant society. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, I mean a society that is seen as tolerant and progressive because two men can kiss each other in public, children can be exposed to hypersexualized drag queens at 5 years of age, and you can freely mutilate your own genitals without any social or societal repercussions. And as a matter of fact, you'll actually get praised for that and be paid for that by the hard-working taxpayer. A society which is completely intolerant to those who show any slightest inclination of dissent. Well, what do I mean by this? Well, look at what Justin Trudeau did to the Canadian truckers who protested because they didn't want to take an experimental jab to keep their jobs. How they were utterly vilified. They were called a fringe and minority by him in Parliament, and their bank accounts were frozen. Anyone who supported them was targeted by the Canadian police and had their bank accounts additionally frozen. And that's the sort of society which I do not want to reside in, I do not want to live in. It's also a society of great division between the rich and the poor, the right and the left, sides of the political spectrum. Hell, even man and woman, you know, all races are pitted against each other, all for the benefit of the ruling class and the politicians. Because as the saying goes, to conquer a people, you must divide them. You must divide them and pit them against each other. And it's an age-old strategy that's been used by tyrants since the dawn of time. This is a sort of society where the only option in order to remain anyway sane or to cope with this absolute horror that you witness is to block it out of your reality with cope. This could include drugs such as alcohol, marijuana, as the case in Canada. Trudeau legalised it, of course, when he got into office. Pornography, video games, consuming mindless entertainment. All of these things have to be done in order to just to bury your head into the sand and forget how bad and polarised and uncaring your society has become. And that's a society which I do not want to live in. I do not want to raise children in the future. But, I can hear you say, surely Justin Trudeau is only the exception to the rule, the bad egg in an otherwise perfectly good basket. Surely the other leaders of the Western world, and indeed the world in general, are honest, hard-working people and reflect the interests of their own people. Well, to that I would say, no, you are quite frankly incorrect on that assumption. And I'm going to give you a few examples right now. Take, for example, the Irish political leadership and the problems they've caused. Number one is the Irish housing crisis. And this is due to many policies that were enacted, such as overly stringent building regulations and requirements. In addition to this, over the past 2 years, the cost of construction materials has gone through the roof due to the supply chain issues caused by the whole COVID scamdemic. And another major kind of important factor in why the cost of housing and rents have gone through the roof, is quite frankly the very open borders immigration policy that Ireland has pursued. And the effects that this has had is pretty depressing, actually, and it really makes me feel just quite frankly depressed and sad. It's resulted in a large-scale homeless population in Ireland. Approximately 10,000 homeless people sleep rough on the streets of Ireland every single night, which is just so saddening and depressing to think of. I believe it really reflects poorly on us as a people, that we've allowed this to happen for so many years now, and most people, at least the ones I see, don't really seem to quite frankly care at all. It's the, I suppose, old adage, well, if it's not my problem, if it doesn't concern me, then I don't care. And anyway, before I get overly emotional, our leaders, rather than try to fix this problem, fix this pretty severe humanitarian crisis, I would call it at this stage. If you've looked in any major metropolitan area, or even a small town like I come from, you can clearly see that the horrible and terrible effects of homelessness, on the people that are living rough. But rather than try to fix this problem, our leaders want to take in at least 20,000 refugees from Ukraine. This would equate to about 4% of our current population. Now, I know a lot of you are probably going to start calling me all sorts of horrible names. How could you be so callous? How could you be so cruel? And yes, I genuinely do feel compassion and pity for the Ukrainians, those civilians who are unfortunately fleeing war. And I wish we could help them. But the sad fact is, and to be perfectly and brutally frank, we cannot. We just do not have the means to accommodate an increase of 4% of our population. What with all the current massive shortage of housing going on right now, it just seems like none of our political leadership even thought or even cared about our homeless population living rough on the streets every single night. I don't know what it is. Is it incompetence? Is it just callousness? Is it just lack of empathy? I don't know. It really just lowers my spirits, and it's such a terrible situation. But I would ask, for those of you who are still quite angry at me for saying that we should take care of our own people before taking care of the population of the rest of the world, I would ask you this: who wins from this situation? Who wins from increasing our population by 4% of a people who are not easily assimilated into our culture? The Irish don't. Our Irish homeless, of course, certainly don't. They don't get free accommodation. Their services are affected due to the massive influx of people and the strain that will put on our infrastructure and our health system even. Our health system, for those of you who are not from Ireland or who are not aware, is currently going through a pretty severe crisis as well. Everyone talks about over in the UK the NHS and how that's severely overstaffed and there's long waiting lists. Well, in Ireland, quite frankly, it's much worse, the situation. But the people living in Ireland don't benefit from this situation due to the rising cost of living. Of course, a lot of Ukrainian people, when they come over, they need a place to stay, obviously, and when you have a large influx of people all demanding a scarce resource, i.e. A home or accommodation, this will naturally enough cause the price of such services to go through the roof. It's again, as I mentioned before, it's just basic supply and demand economics. The famous graph that everyone quotes. I might put a picture of it up now. But even the Ukrainians, I would say, they don't benefit from the situation at all. They don't win. The reason why is they don't actually get to experience their own homeland and culture. Um, they're just tragically transplanted out of their homeland and put here. And it must be a terrible feeling to be completely apart from your own people. Indeed, in the United States, after the famine in the 1840s, many Irish immigrants to the United States and to Great Britain described how lonely they felt, how isolated from their people, because they were living in a foreign land, many thousands of miles away from home. I imagine the Ukrainian refugees over here must feel a similar sort of way about their plight. Meanwhile, of course, their home country is completely destroyed in a completely pointless, futile conflict. Speaking of this whole situation and how callous our Irish leadership has become to the general public, I think our current Minister for Justice, Helen McEntee's comments, really show our leaders' attitudes towards us. Recently, I read this interview with her in the Irish Times, and essentially she indicated the government will avoid, if possible, forcing people or businesses to open their homes or give up property to house Ukrainian refugees. And this is the direct quote from her. "We want to encourage people to come forwards, not to force anybody to have to give up their property or accommodation." Now, from a supposedly democratically elected leader, this is it's pretty chilling stuff, to be honest. She's basically giving the people of Ireland an ultimatum. Basically, do as we say, or else we're going to mobilise the state forces against you and force you to do it, regardless of your personal choice. And quite frankly, this is blatant tyranny. Speaking of the seizing of private property, if you're interested in that and how that will affect Ireland in the future, you should really check out the 39th Amendment to the Constitution. I'll drop a link to the official Dáil Éireann website and where you can actually find the article itself. But this would essentially, in very basic terms, delimit the right to private property. But I really encourage you to check out the 39th Amendment, as it's really quite an overt attack on our freedoms as a people, and we should really be aware of this, and we should be really opposing this now, while it's currently in the embryonic stages of the Dáil process. To finish up on Ireland, did anyone vote for this? Was anyone asked about, hey, we have a massive homeless population, but should we fix this, or should we help 200,000 Ukrainian refugees fleeing from a war-torn area? Was there any discussion? Was there any referendum with the Irish people? No, the government just decided arbitrarily one day, well, this is what we're going to do, and everyone, and you public, you peasants, you better shut up, or else, if you don't like it, well, we don't care. We don't care. What's your opinion to us, Was there any concrete or meaningful discussion on mass importing 200,000 people when we have a pretty severe homeless population at the moment? Was there anything? No, of course not, because our leaders in Ireland don't care about us, in the same way that Trudeau doesn't care about his people in Canada. As I mentioned before, we're nothing to these people. We're just like vermin on their boots. We're almost like farm animals, like pigs, like sheep. We're just seen as assets to be milked dry through taxes and through over stringent government regulations. And by the way, this phenomenon of our leaders not really caring about us or our best interests isn't just confined to Canada and Ireland. Let's just take a look over the pond at our closest neighbour, the UK, and see what they're doing. Currently in the news, the two things which seem to be occupying the news cycle in the UK at the moment are, according to my research, the Platinum Jubilee and the whole Partygate scenario. Both of which just show the utter, I suppose, just disinterest the ruling class in the UK has for its own citizens. For instance, the Platinum Jubilee, I believe, was estimated to cost 1.3 to 1.5 billion pounds. Now, the next phrase may kind of reveal somewhat of my own personal biases, because I don't particularly like monarchies. But for what? What was the sum spent for? What was the purpose of it? To celebrate 70 years of Elizabeth II on the throne. Okay, it should be celebrated, but not to the effect of nearly £1.5 billion. I mean, that's just insane. And when you think of it, it's quite an insult to the British people, because meanwhile the rising cost of living is really beginning to affect people in the UK, particularly those on the lower end of the income scale, you know, those people who are unfortunate enough to live paycheck to paycheck. Indeed, the Houses of Commons said these living costs are estimated to cause an increase in absolute poverty in the UK. Well, how bad are we talking about? Well, by the end of the year, according to their statistics, the absolute poverty will rise by 1.3 million people approximately. And this includes 500,000 children, so 500,000 kids. Which is just absolutely so disheartening, really, and depressing. But meanwhile, are the politicians doing anything about it, or the British royalty doing anything about it? No, they aren't. They blow £1.5 billion on some frivolous and really pointless event. Apart from boosting the Queen's ego, what's it do, really? Yes, the argument is that it increases tourism and revenue and all the rest of it. But I believe in the last one, back in 2011, tourism costs and all the other rises in income that were associated from the event, such as, you know, increased hotels bookings and so forth, and all the sales of merchandise and so forth, only accounted for, I believe, around little over half of the costs of the event. So it really only made back about half of the amount that was spent. And really, I think it's quite despicable that you know, Tory or Labour MPs aren't really raising the issue in the Houses of Parliament. You know, questioning why do we need to spend such exorbitant amounts on such a meaningless event. And this could be my own personal biases. I'm from Ireland. We're a republic. We don't have a constitutional monarchy nor an absolute monarchy. So this could just be some cultural misunderstanding on my part, but I just, at least in my mind, you can't justify spending £1.5 billion while the standard of living and indeed poverty is going to go up for the vast majority of people in the UK, particularly those who are less well off, you know. In addition to this, I also read an article in the Times saying that due to a lot of energy mismanagement in the UK, such as over-investing in green energy like solar, wind, wave, etc., that there will be possible power cuts for approximately 6 million homes in late in this year and early into 2023 as well, over the winter months, because the UK being, and Ireland of course being quite cold in the winter, we have to heat up a lot of homes, and a lot of that is done using electricity. So those times there'll be quite a high strain put on the grid at that time. Meanwhile, no politician, at least that I've heard of, such as Johnson or Corbyn or anyone like that, seems to really be discussing this or raising this as an issue, which is really quite sad and really quite despicable, if I'm being honest. And let's not even talk about the apathy and the absolute ruthlessness that the political class in America shows towards its own citizens. Just look up the many corrupt dealings of the Biden family in Ukraine, for example, with Hunter Biden and the whole Burisma energy scandal that was suppressed in the 2020 election, but is thankfully coming out now, finally. And also look at the disastrous policies that were implemented by Governor Newsom in California, and how terribly that's affecting the citizens there. I believe in the last 2 years, California, there's more people moving out of California than moving in currently. And the problem's actually become so bad that the U-Haul truck company, you know, the moving company, has actually been running out of trucks, you know, because people are fleeing the state in such vast numbers due to the absolutely catastrophic policies implemented by Governor Gavin Newsom. And I really encourage you to look them up, as there's not really much time to go into them here, as I fear this video is becoming quite long and drawn out now. In conclusion, I hope I've opened your eyes and shown our governments are not led by those that are interested in our general well-being or even care about us at all. All our politicians want to do is to serve their own interests and their own moneyed interests. Hopefully, this will inspire you to demand that our leaders better represent us in our governments and respect us as people. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I put countless hours into it. And please do subscribe, as I spent an awful lot of time doing it. Also, I had to torture myself by watching several hours of that creep Justin Trudeau's speeches. I honestly think that should actually be some sort of form of torture used by the CIA or MI6 if they want to extract important information from potential suspects. Just bombard them with like several hours of that creep Trudeau and the pathetic way he pontificates and expresses himself. And I think any would-be terrorist or assassin would quite frankly just want to like spill the beans after that. I know I did. Such a repulsive little man. But please do leave a comment and tell me what you thought of the comparison. To be honest, truthfully, I included Princess Diana, probably because of a few of my own biases. You see, I was recently watching some documentary footage from the 80s about the whole AIDS pandemic. As a matter of fact, for a potential future video, more on that potentially later in another video. But what profoundly touched me and why I decided to include her in this film is the absolute care and compassion that she showed towards those who were unfortunate enough to suffer from that terrible, terrible disease. Everyone remembers the likes of Freddie Mercury, Rock Hudson, Howard Ashman. For those of you who aren't musical fans, he was the lyricist who wrote the kind of vocals for Beauty and the Beast, Little Mermaid, The Lion King, all those sort of Broadway films that were kind of adopted by Disney in kind of the late 80s, early 90s. But to get back to my point, in the 80s, people who are unfortunate enough to contract that terrible condition, AIDS, were treated much like those who refused to take the jab last year. If you recall, many people refused to take the jab or else lose their job. Both airlines in the United States, United, Delta, and even Southwest did that to their pilots, which is absolutely, to be perfectly frank, just evil and despicable and cruel. But in the 80s, like people who were unfortunate enough to contract AIDS, they were similarly fired from their jobs, like those who refused to take the jab and were completely vilified. And but something about the way Princess Diana treated those people who were fortunate enough to get it, it genuinely, and I don't say this lightly, it genuinely brought tears to my eyes and moved me on such a profound level. Everyone goes on about her beauty, and yes, she was undeniably beautiful. That's not simping, by the way, it's objectively true. But nobody talks about her kindness, her compassion all that much, which really makes a person beautiful. Truly, in all senses of the word. But yes, I honestly fear that we're losing that sort of compassion Diana had, both as individuals and on a wider societal level. And I just hope by bringing her up in this video, that hopefully it inspires people to be a bit kinder and all that. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. And God bless, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.